Far away from the busy cities, deep in the heart of Africa, there was a small and quiet village surrounded by wide golden savannas. Tall acacia trees stood like silent guardians over the land, their branches stretching toward the endless blue sky. During the day, the warm sun painted the fields in shades of gold, and at night, the sky filled with countless shining stars. The village was simple but full of life. Small huts made of clay and straw stood close together, forming narrow, dusty paths where children ran and laughed. Women carried large clay pots of water on their heads from the nearby river, while men worked hard in the fields or took care of the cattle grazing in the distance. Every evening, the villagers gathered around small fires, sharing stories, songs, and laughter under the glowing moon. Life in the village was not always easy. The people faced droughts, storms, and many hardships, but they stayed strong together like one big family. They believed in helping each other, and no one was ever truly alone in times of trouble. Among the villagers lived a young girl named Amina. She was not from a rich family, and her life was full of challenges from the very beginning. But there was something special about her, something that made her different from the others. While other children played without worry, Amina often helped her mother with difficult tasks. She carried water from the river, gathered firewood from the forest, and worked tirelessly to support her family. The villagers did not know it yet, but this quiet, hard-working girl would one day become the strongest woman they had ever seen, a woman whose courage and strength would change the village forever. Amina's childhood was not like the childhood of other children in the village. While most children spent their days playing under the warm African sun, running through the dusty paths and laughing with their friends, Amina's life was filled with responsibilities and hardships. When Amina was very young, her father passed away after a long illness. His death left a deep sadness in the small family and made life much more difficult for Amina and her mother. Her mother tried her best to stay strong, but taking care of the household alone was never easy. From that moment on, Amina understood that she had to grow up faster than other children. Every morning before sunrise, she woke up to help her mother with the daily chores. She walked long distances to the river carrying empty clay pots, then returned with them filled with heavy water balanced carefully on her head. After that, she would go to the nearby forest to gather firewood. The dry branches were often heavy, but Amina never complained. With determination in her eyes, she carried the bundles back to the village, step by step, even when the hot sun burned the earth beneath her feet. Some villagers felt sorry for the young girl and whispered about how difficult her life was. But Amina never allowed sadness to control her heart. Instead, these struggles slowly made her stronger, both in body and in spirit. Her mother often looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. She knew that her daughter was not like the others. There was a quiet strength inside Amina that seemed to grow stronger with every challenge she faced. The hardships of her childhood were shaping her into someone extraordinary, though no one in the village could yet imagine just how strong she would become. The years passed. The villagers began to notice something unusual about Amina. She was still young, but her strength seemed far greater than that of most people in the village, even some of the grown men. Every morning, Amina continued her daily chores without hesitation. She carried large clay pots filled with water from the river, balancing them carefully on her head as she walked along the dusty path back to the village. Many women struggled to carry one heavy pot, but Amina often carried two without showing signs of exhaustion. One afternoon, a group of villagers watched in surprise as Amina lifted a large bundle of firewood that usually required two people to carry. With steady steps and calm determination, she placed the heavy load on her back and walked toward her home as if it weighed almost nothing. People began whispering among themselves. "Have you seen that girl?" One villager said quietly. "She carries wood like a grown man." Another replied in amazement. But Amina never tried to show off her strength. She didn't see it as something special. To her, it was simply a way to help her mother and make their lives a little easier. Her mother often worried that Amina worked too hard, but she could also see the quiet determination in her daughter's eyes. No matter how difficult the task was, Amina always faced it with courage and patience. Soon, whenever someone in the village needed help with something heavy or difficult, they began to call Amina. And every time, she came with a humble smile, ready to lend a hand. Little by little, The villagers realized that Amina was not an ordinary girl. There was something rare and powerful within her, a strength that was not only in her body, but deep inside her here. As time passed, Amina's strength became impossible for the villagers to ignore. What once seemed like small moments of courage and hard work slowly turned into stories that everyone in the village began talking about. One morning, several villagers gathered near the well, watching as people collected water for the day. The sun was rising slowly, casting a golden glow across the village. Women stood in line with their clay pots, waiting patiently for their turn. Suddenly, Amina arrived. Without making a big scene, she stepped forward and filled two large clay pots with water. Each pot was heavy enough to make most people struggle, but Amina calmly lifted one onto her head and carried the other in her hands. The villagers stared in disbelief. "How can she carry so much?" one woman whispered. "I have never seen anyone so young with such strength," another villager said. But the surprise did not stop there. Later that same day, a farmer was struggling to move a large wooden log that had fallen near his field. Several men had already tried to move it, but it was too heavy. Amina walked by and noticed the problem. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and offered to help. The men laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But within moments, Amina pushed the heavy log aside with determination and steady effort. The laughter quickly turned into silence. The villagers looked at each other in shock. No one expected such strength from a young girl. From that day on, people began to see Amina differently. She was no longer just a hardworking girl helping her mother. She had become something much more, a symbol of courage and strength that the entire village could not ignore. As time passed, Amina's strength became impossible for the villagers to ignore. What once seemed like small moments of courage and hard work slowly turned into stories that everyone in the village began talking about. One morning, several villagers gathered near the well, watching as people collected water for the day. The sun was rising slowly, casting a golden glow across the village. Women stood in line with their clay pots, waiting patiently for their turn. Suddenly, Amina arrived. Without making a big scene, she stepped forward and filled two large clay pots with water. Each pot was heavy enough to make most people struggle, but Amina calmly lifted one onto her head and carried the other in her hands. The villagers stared in disbelief. "How can she carry so much?" one woman whispered. "I have never seen anyone so young with such strength," another villager said. But the surprise did not stop there. Later that same day, a farmer was struggling to move a large wooden log that had fallen near his field. Several men had already tried to move it, but it was too heavy. Amina walked by and noticed the problem. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and offered to help. The men laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But within moments, Amina pushed the heavy log aside with determination and steady effort. The laughter quickly turned into silence. The villagers looked at each other in shock. No one expected such strength from a young girl. From that day on, people began to see Amina differently. She was no longer just a hardworking girl helping her mother. She had become something much more, a symbol of courage and strength that the entire village could not ignore. Life in the village was never easy, and Amina knew that better than anyone. Every day brought new challenges, and sometimes those challenges felt too heavy for even the strongest person. But Amina never allowed difficulties to break her spirit. The seasons in the African savanna could be harsh. Some years the rains came late, and the land became dry and cracked under the burning sun. Crops struggled to grow, and the villagers often worried about how they would feed their families. During those difficult times, many people felt tired and discouraged. But Amina refused to lose hope. Every morning, she woke up before the sun rose above the horizon. While the village was still quiet and the sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, Amina was already working. She carried water from the river, gathered firewood, and helped her mother prepare food for the day. Even when the heat became unbearable and the dusty winds blew across the fields, Amina kept going. Sweat ran down her face, and her feet ached from walking long distances, but she never complained. Some villagers often asked her, "Amina, don't you ever get tired?" Amina would simply smile and reply, "Of course I do. But giving up will not make life easier." Her words surprised many people. For someone so young, she carried a wisdom far beyond her years. Slowly, the villagers began to admire not just her physical strength, but also her strong heart and determined spirit. Amina taught them something important, that true strength is not only about lifting heavy things. Sometimes, the greatest strength is the courage to keep moving forward, even when life becomes difficult and the path ahead seems uncertain. Amina's strength was not just in her body, it was in her heart. As she grew older, the villagers began to notice that she always offered help to anyone in need, no matter how small or big the task. Her courage and kindness became well known throughout the village. Every morning, she walked through the dusty paths, greeting neighbors and checking if anyone needed assistance. If a woman struggled to carry a heavy clay pot of water, Amina would step forward without hesitation. If a farmer needed help lifting a fallen log or repairing a hut after a storm, Amina was there, ready to lend her hands. One day, an elderly woman in the village had dropped her basket of food near the river. The food spilled into the dirt, and the woman began to cry. Amina rushed to her side, cleaned the mess, and helped her carry the basket home. The woman hugged Amina tightly, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "You are truly a blessing, child," she said. Amina never sought praise or reward for helping others. Her satisfaction came from seeing the smiles on people's faces and knowing she had made their burdens a little lighter. Children in the village began to look up to her as a role model. They would follow her around, watching her actions carefully, learning how kindness and strength could coexist. Even the men of the village, who initially doubted her abilities, started to respect her courage and determination. Through her constant efforts, Amina became more than just a strong girl. She became the heart of the village. Her compassion, combined with her unusual strength, inspired everyone. People began to understand that true greatness was not only measured by physical power, but by the willingness to help others and stand tall in the face of life's challenges. Amina's name spread across the village, whispered with admiration by everyone who had felt the touch of her helping hands. One year, dark clouds gathered over the village, covering the golden African sky. The wind howled through the tall acacia trees, and a heavy storm was coming. Villagers hurried to secure their homes, covering the roofs with extra straw and tying down loose belongings. The distant rumble of thunder warned everyone that this storm would not be ordinary. As the first raindrops fell, the wind grew stronger, bending trees and scattering small items across the dusty paths. Children ran to their mothers, frightened by the roaring storm. The river, which usually flowed calmly nearby, began to rise, and the muddy water threatened to flood the lower fields. Despite the chaos, Amina did not run for shelter. She knew many villagers were in danger. With her heart pounding but her mind clear, she ran through the village, calling out to neighbors. "Hold on. Stay inside your homes. Take the children to safety," she shouted above the howling wind. Suddenly, a large branch broke from a tree and fell across the path, blocking the way for an elderly man trying to carry water to his home. Without hesitation, Amina ran forward, lifted the heavy branch with all her strength, and cleared the way. All around her, other villagers struggled against the storm, but Amina moved tirelessly from house to house, helping where she could. She lifted fallen debris, helped children across slippery paths, and guided frightened animals to safety. By the time the storm began to calm, the village had suffered damage, but no lives were lost. The villagers, soaked and exhausted, looked around in disbelief at the young girl who had risked herself to save them all. From that day forward, the storm became part of the legend of Amina, the girl whose courage and strength had protected the village when nature itself had turned against them. She was no longer just strong, she was a. The morning after the great storm, the village slowly began to recover. Trees had fallen, huts were damaged, and the fields were muddy and torn, but the villagers' spirits were lifted by Amina's courage. Her bravery during the storm had left a mark on everyone's heart. People began to speak about how she had faced the raging winds without fear, how she had lifted heavy logs and cleared debris, and how she had guided children and animals to safety. Many whispered among themselves, amazed that such a young girl could act with the courage of a grown warrior. Amina, however, did not see herself as a hero. She walked through the village quietly, helping families rebuild their homes, carrying heavy mud-filled pots, and repairing broken fences. She smiled at everyone she met, offering comfort and reassurance. Her calm and determined presence gave the villagers hope that they could recover, no matter how bad the storm had been. Even the village elders, who had lived through many storms, admitted they had never seen such bravery. They watched her work tirelessly, sometimes carrying loads heavier than many men could manage, and could only shake their heads in awe. Children ran alongside her, curious and inspired. They wanted to help, just to be near someone as strong and fearless as Amina. Women and men began to offer their hands, learning from her example, slowly realizing that strength was not only about muscles, but also about courage, heart, and determination. By evening, the village was still battered, but it stood stronger than before. And at the center of it all was Amina, her bravery shining brighter than the fading sun, a living example of hope, resilience, and unshakable courage. From that day on, the villagers no longer spoke of her as just a girl. They spoke of her as Amina the Brave, the one who had faced the storm when everyone else was afraid, and had saved them all with nothing but her strength and heart. After the storm, something remarkable happened in the village. The people who had once seen Amina as just a hard-working girl began to view her in a completely new light. Her bravery, strength, and unwavering spirit during the storm had transformed her from a helper into a true hero. Villagers whispered stories about her every day. Mothers told their children, "See how Amina lifted that huge branch? That is what courage looks like." Farmers spoke with awe about how she had guided animals and cleared the fields, saving crops and homes alike. Even the elders, who had witnessed many storms over the years, admitted that they had never seen anyone, man or woman, act with such fearlessness and determination. Amina, however, remained humble. She never asked for praise, and she never bragged about what she had done. For her, helping others was a responsibility, not a way to gain attention. Every day, she continued to carry water, lift heavy loads, and assist her neighbors, always with a quiet smile and steady hands. Her courage inspired everyone in the village. Children who had been afraid to try new things began to work harder and dream bigger. Young women, in particular, saw her as a symbol of what they could achieve if they believed in themselves. Even the men started to respect her in ways they had never imagined, recognizing that true strength was not just in muscles, but in heart and mind. Over time, Amina's acts of bravery became legends. The village no longer measured greatness by age or size, but by the courage and determination a person showed in the face of danger. And in every story told by the fire at night, her name was spoken with reverence. Amina had become more than a girl. She had become the village hero, a living example of strength, kindness, and unwavering courage, someone who would never be forgotten. As Amina's fame grew throughout the village, people became curious about the secret behind her extraordinary strength. How could such a young girl lift heavy logs, carry 2 clay pots of water at once, and help everyone without ever seeming tired? Villagers would often ask her, their voices full of wonder and admiration, "Amina, what is your secret?" Amina always smiled quietly before answering. She would take a moment, looking at the golden savanna around her, the wide skies above, and then say softly, "True strength does not come from the body alone. It comes from the heart." At first, the villagers did not understand. Many assumed that physical power required strong muscles or special training. But as they watched her daily actions, the way she helped the elderly, guided children, and lifted heavy burdens without complaint, they began to see what she truly meant. Her strength was not only in her muscles, but in her courage, determination, and compassion. Amina faced hardships without fear. She carried heavy loads, but she also carried hope, kindness, and love for everyone around her. That inner strength allowed her to keep going, even when others might have given up. Some of the village elders began sharing her wisdom with the children. They told them, "See Amina? She teaches us that true power is not measured by what you can lift or how fast you run. True power is in the heart. Courage, love, and determination make a person stronger than any storm or challenge." The villagers began to realize that strength could take many forms. Physical ability mattered, yes, but it was the heart, the mind, and the spirit that truly defined greatness. Amina's secret became a lesson for the entire village. Real strength was about helping others, standing tall in adversity, and never losing hope, no matter how difficult life became. Her heart, they realized, was stronger than anything the village had ever seen. Amina's story began to spread beyond her own daily acts of bravery. Children in the village, especially young girls, started to see her as more than just strong. They saw her as a living example of what was possible when courage and determination guided every action. Every day, children would follow her quietly, observing how she carried heavy water pots, lifted fallen branches, and helped her neighbors. They watched her smile at everyone she met, even when the work was difficult or the sun was burning hot. Slowly, they began to imitate her. Girls would try to carry small loads, help their mothers with chores, and face their fears in ways they had never imagined. Even older villagers found inspiration in her example. Farmers who had given up hope after the storm started rebuilding their fields with renewed energy. Mothers who once doubted their own strength found themselves lifting heavier loads and managing multiple tasks with determination. Amina had shown them that courage and heart could make anyone stronger than they believed. Stories about her bravery, patience, and kindness were told around evening fires, passed from one generation to the next. Each telling emphasized not just her physical strength, but her spirit, how she faced challenges without complaint, helped others without expecting reward, and believed in herself even when the world seemed difficult. Amina's life became a symbol of hope and empowerment. The villagers began to understand that strength is not just about muscles or size, but about heart, resilience, and the willingness to take action even when fear or doubt appears. By inspiring others to believe in themselves, Amina changed the village in ways that no storm or hardship could. She had become more than a hero. She had become a beacon of courage, a teacher of life's most important lessons, and an enduring source of inspiration for everyone who witnessed her strength. The village learned an important truth. One person's courage can awaken the bravery and hope in an entire community. Years passed, but Amina's story did not fade. Even as she grew older, her name remained in the hearts of every villager, whispered around fires, shared during celebrations, and passed down to the children as a lesson in courage, strength, and kindness. The small African village, once quiet and ordinary, had been forever changed by her actions. People remembered the girl who had carried heavy loads, lifted fallen branches, and faced storms with unwavering determination. They remembered the girl who helped everyone without seeking reward, whose heart had made her stronger than anyone else in the village. Amina became more than a person, she became a symbol. To the villagers, she represented hope in times of hardship, courage when fear threatened to take over, and the belief that even one individual could make a difference. Mothers taught their daughters to be brave like Amina. Fathers reminded their sons that strength came from kindness and determination, not just physical power. Travelers who visited the village heard the stories and carried them beyond the savannah, spreading tales of a young girl whose bravery and heart had inspired an entire community. The legend of Amina grew, inspiring people in nearby villages to believe in their own strength and the power of helping others. Even in her old age, Amina continued to help her people. She worked alongside them in the fields, guided the children, and offered wisdom whenever needed. Her body may have grown older, but her heart remained as strong as ever. Generations later, the story of Amina, the strongest woman alive, was still told with reverence. Children learned that courage, compassion, and determination could change the world, just as Amina had changed her village. Her legacy lived on, not just in stories, but in the hearts of everyone she had inspired. Amina's life became a timeless lesson. True strength comes from the heart, and one courageous soul can leave a mark that lasts forever.